keep up. Please don't crash. That's 5-0 on your ass. Don't get stuck. My shit blasting up. Window tinted, can't get caught. My bitch bad, sport more leave you on your ass. Taking up.
Yeah. What's the deal, everybody, man? This is Ricky Montoya checking in, aka the foolest of all bears, and you are now tuned in to I Think You're My Driver podcast, man. So thank you to everybody who has always tuned in with me thus far. Of course, if you are not already following me, that ad is going to be at itymd.podcast, which is going to be on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Spotify, Apple Music Podcasts, and everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at, man. So I do thank everybody who has always tuned in with me thus far. If you have any type of stories or you even want to jump on the podcast, man, you can refer back to those ads. But if you have a story that you just want to type up to me, man, you want to keep it as anonymous as possible, man, I got an email, which is itymd.podcast@gmail.com, man. So thank you to everybody who is always tuning in with me. This week's episode, I want to take a little bit of time to give everybody a little bit more of a positive affirmation episode, man. I think coming off of the last episode that I just had where I talked about my birthday, and I basically centered the episode thanks to my wife. Thanks to my wife, she actually put together a great set of questions that kind of helps you guys get an idea as far as like where I am in age and stage, wherever you want to call it, man. And it just gave you a better idea. So I kind of want to stay on the same accord as far as just sticking on the positive affirmation side, man. So I actually was reading this article on Reddit. I try my best not to fall into Reddit too much because we know how a lot of y'all Reddit fools get. But besides the point, man, a lot of the times when I find myself doing research to try to find Uber stories, I find a lot of negative ass stories where people are always on there airing out their grievances. And especially when you're doing in this Uber Lyft business, man, a lot of the times it's really just people getting a chance to air out their grievances that they have with their life going on at that time, man. Now, with a lot of these type of times, man, you really have to give people a lot of grace, man. Now, you don't naturally have the ability to just give people grace, man. It takes a while for you to get to that point, but once you finally are able to reach that point, you kind of have a different way of handling a lot of situations, man. And this is kind of just the topic of discussion for today, which is going to be positive affirmations for you guys, man. So, like I said, with this article that I found, this guy actually took some time out to say, you know what, I want to give out some positive things that Uber has given me. And basically, just to kind of summarize what he was saying, man, he centered this out in 3 bullet points. The first bullet point was basically being able to feel a sort of sense of himself when it came to being kind of just an independent contractor, or as you would say, be your own boss, man. Now, of course, there's a lot of pros and cons when it comes to being your own boss because nobody is hounding you. Nobody is behind you to tell you what you need to do. But when you have a goal at the end of the day, man, you got to maintain whatever positivity or whatever level that you're trying to maintain in order to get to that goal. And that's where you kind of have to fall back on yourself to create that discipline, man. So, I mean, in all honesty, bro, whenever you're doing a business such as this as an independent contractor, man, it really does give you a sense of like power, if that's really the word you want to use, man. Like, let's be honest, bro. If you sit yourself out and let's say you want to, go ahead and drive for a taxi company or whatever the case, man, you're putting a lot of money on the line. And whenever your money's on the line, a lot of the times those people are in the red. So those people aren't really the most nicest social people because they're already in the red, man. So if you take it from the opposite aspect, whenever you're putting all that money into your personal vehicle that you're driving, you already have this like sense of, how can I say it? You already have a sense of self whenever you're driving your personal vehicle. So it gives you like another power of just being like, let me find a way to help maintain my personal vehicle, whether that's maintenance, whether that's getting car washes, whether it's making sure you always have an air freshener intact. It's just always making sure that your main source of income looks as presentable as always. On top of that, also making sure that you look presentable as well. Because I'm going to go ahead and be honest, man, vanity aside, of course, it's always good to just look very well groomed. Now, when it comes to, the whole Uber driver Lyft business, a lot of us are not really getting in the car having expectations of the people. But most of the time, you get a lot more better results, better tips, and just a better experience with people when you are a lot more groomed. And you got to make sure that you're taking care of yourself altogether, man, because at the end of the day, you are sitting in a car with somebody. You're also sitting, if you're in the South, such as I am, man, it's a little bit more hotter out here. So we got the air cranking. It's going on throughout the entire day. Not to mention, you have it on circulation mode. So whatever has been going through that car is circulating and pushing right out of the vents all day, man. So it's always making sure that you can find a way to create a good sense of self. Another note that he had also notated on this bullet point is he had also said that it helped him be able to have positive interactions with people, man. And that's another thing, man. Already right off the bat, if you are a people person, it gives you just like, it's almost like it's not a job if you're a people person, because it's just like, oh, I get paid to talk to people and take them to their destinations. Like, sign me up, right? So that already is a plus. But in this guy's example, he actually basically said that he was the complete opposite, to where he can become extremely intense with people when he's having a lot of these conversations, which makes people feel uncomfortable. So it also just helps reel himself back in to maintain this certain level to ensure that he is making people feel comfortable, but also comfortable while trying to make others feel comfortable, because that's a whole other skill that really, let me tell you, that is a whole other skill that nobody can teach you. You have to learn that on your own, man. And especially when it comes to like dealing with certain people or being around a certain type of customer who just acted a certain way, it takes a lot of time for you to kind of shake that off, but also it allows you to develop the character that you're needing to become in order to maintain and stick with this independent contractor gig, man. So, that's just a couple of things that I kind of noticed whenever I was like reading past this particular passage, because just kind of just like reflecting back on my times of like doing Uber and Lyft, man, because there's definitely been some times where, let's just say, for instance, I worked for a contract company, and this contract company only had a certain amount of routes that they got assigned and also a certain amount of vans that they had. I think if I'm not mistaken, they probably had over like 30 vans or something of that sort. And nine times out of 10, they may get like 28 routes. So sometimes I kind of had to figure out how to split routes, or, do certain things just to kind of help all their workers, because with only having with only having 30 vans and you have a team of 45 people, somebody's going to get cut. Somebody's going to go home for the day. So, in all honesty, bro, when I worked that position, I did not like it whatsoever. Now, it was also kind of just an extension of Uber and Lyft, but instead of like picking up people, it was, you're actually trying to figure out a workflow to, hey, these boxes go to here. I need to have this number on this side, because this matches for bag 1 and 2, which are the first 15 stops of the route. So you're kind of having to basically like plan everything. And if you're like really organized and you know how to like build systems for yourself, you'll thrive in that job. Me, on the other hand, I'm not going to say that I didn't thrive, but it wasn't my favorite job that I ever did. I'll go ahead and be honest with you. So whenever there are the days that, I'm popping up there and I end up getting sent home because I don't have a route, of course I'm jumping back on the Uber and Lyft. But, you have your uniform. So 9 times out of 10, I didn't wear that damn t-shirt that they gave me. So I always wore like a regular ass t-shirt, but you had to wear the pants. So I got the Amazon pants, and I'll never forget one time. I remember I went to go pick up this lady, and I think she was working at like some kind of like nursing home or like a daycare or something like that. And, we're sitting there, talking and whatnot. And she was talking about how, with the company that she works for, a lot of the times the shift change becomes something that's like a really difficult task, which is kind of interesting to think that whenever you're a part of a certain type of shift, let's just say morning shift, for example, that people start coming in for the shift change around 2 to 4 o'clock. So if you're leaving between that 2 to 4 o'clock, that you have tasks that you have to get done. And she was telling me for her job, an example, her job was kind of the opposite, to where 9 times out of 10, nobody really wanted to finish their tasks that they actually had to do, which can be extremely annoying. So it gives you another sense of trying to create a system for yourself and making sure that you're independent on your tasks. But it can get frustrating whenever other people aren't following suit or don't have the same system. So she was kind of just voicing these frustrations about how it can get very annoying with shift changes. And when people aren't handling their task, you got to stay overtime and do all this other stuff. And she was kind of just airing out all her grievances about it. And I was kind of just amazed and like thinking, like, dang, like I'm over here complaining because I got sent home from my job to, go and work extra hard and I'm feeling disappointed and, whatever the case. And she just happened to just tell me, like, she was like, the one thing that you always got to remember and remind yourself is nobody can knock your hustle. If whatever you do works for you to pay your bills and take care of your family, that's all that matters at the end of the day. And she basically told me, she was like, and I see the pants that you have on. I can see the Amazon logo that are sitting on your pants right now. So that lets me know that you're a hard worker and you're willing to get it done. It's like not a lot of people are out here, getting off of work and just getting right to it. There's a lot of people that'll just throw the towel in. They're like, nope, it's not going to happen. Nope, I'm not going to be able to get this, not going to be able to do that. Real pessimistic. But whenever you're in a position of independence, being your own boss, you cannot be pessimistic. You cannot count yourself out before you've even tried to attack the task, man. So it gives you another sense of perseverance and giving yourself that extra motivation because being that you are your own boss, you have to create your own system and your own motivation, man. So it's very important whenever you're kind of just running through these tasks. And one thing that I've learned specifically as an adult, like I said, I just turned 28. I've learned to kind of use other people as like an example, man. Now, it's kind of self-explanatory when you say that because let's just say for instance, whenever you're in school or whenever you're growing up and you're growing up in a certain area, there's one of three people that grow up in specific areas. Some people grow up in a certain area and they want to stay there. They don't see themselves leaving there, which is nothing wrong with that. If that's what works for you, that's what works for you, man. The second person is the person who's figuring out why their family didn't take the necessary steps to get them out of their circumstances, or why they didn't take the certain steps to figure out what do we need to do so that way we can ensure our kids don't do that. So the people that are questioning it, so they're trying to figure out their own way. And then of course there's a third person who's determined. You know, they got their head in their books, they have their head focused towards their goals. They have a certain task that they are trying to complete, and they know that they have those stepping stones that they need to punch through in order to get through that last checkpoint in order to reach their goals, man. So you kind of got to be a certain person in order to be a independent contractor, be your own boss. So when you kind of figure out these type of, how can you say it? When you figure out these like personality traits about yourself, man, it kind of gives you a good self assurance. And, kind of such as this guy, man, it gives you another sense of self confidence, man. And, like I say, aside from vanity and whatnot, when you have people that are kind of recognizing the work that you're putting in that you kind of fail to acknowledge for yourself, because that's honestly a very big thing about how you speak with yourself as your own boss. You have to make sure that you are sure of yourself and you don't allow your own emotions and your own thoughts to get in your way of completing that task, man. So that just lets you know, man, that whenever you have certain goals in line, it really helps you a lot of the way too. Like, as a matter of fact, I have a friend of mine who he did Lyft and Uber at one point in time, and he had actually created a system for himself. He basically had told me that it was like, hey, I have like a certain goal that I'm trying to reach, whether it's debt, whether it's just I'm just trying to buy something for myself. So what I did is I wrote out a plan to figure out, okay, so I have this, let's just say debt, for example. I have a $3,500 debt that I have to pay off within the next year and a half. So if it's supposed to take 2 years for me to pay this off and I'm already 3 months deep, what's another way that I can bring extra income in? So he broke that system down to say, okay, so when I'm driving Lyft and Uber, on average, I can bring home somewhere between $60 to $90 a day, you know, minus gas and expenses and stuff like that. So basically, kind of just like breaking it down and figuring out your system and your consistency. And that's also going to play a factor as far as like you being a driver as well, is being consistent about it. Because the only way you're going to be able to create and maintain the system that you've built for yourself is you have to be consistent, bro. And that's also another great personality trait that you're going to have if you decide to go in business for yourself. I'll be honest with you, bro. If you're driving Lyft and Uber, this is honestly just like another extension of you figuring out whether you could be a supervisor, an operations supervisor, a manager, or even be your own entrepreneur owning your company. Because if you can handle just working out of your car, being good to people, making sure you're on time, you're punctual, you're ahead of time, you're, following safety codes, you're not getting tickets or driving reckless or even just getting reckless out the mouth with people. Because let's be honest, when you're working customer service, you are going to run into conflict. Like that's inevitable. Like it's going to happen regardless. But the issue that you can put yourself in, the box that you can put yourself into is what's going to hold you back the most. If you sit down and you think about all the negatives that could possibly happen, nothing positive is going to come to you if you're in a negative space, man. Now, of course, sometimes you need a little bit of positivity to pull you out of the rut. That's 1000%. But also at the same time, if you are negative in your mindset and the way that you speak to yourself or the way you speak about your goals, nothing positive is going to come, man. So the way you speak really means a whole lot. Like even something like this, bro, if you're in a sense of like being a content creator or just doing anything to where you're having to use your voice and your words have so much power. And that's something that you learn over time. So it's the same thing with Lyft and Uber, bro. The way you interact with people and the things that you say to people. Because since you're in the car with them and this is your personal car, they know what you look like. They know what your car looks like. And if you're in a, smaller town, so to say, it's going to be easy to find you, bro. So, not to get too dark or anything like that, bro, but that just really lets you know to make sure always do good business, man. I tell you what, I heard this interview from this guy the other day, and he was, talking about like drug dealing and whatnot. But he had basically like said this example of like, if you do good business, I do great business. If you communicate to me, I'm going to make sure I'm transparent as possible to you. So it's basically as if somebody's giving you good service, you have to exceed that level to ensure that you can maintain this certain status, so to say, that you're trying to reach. But also, if you're consistent with the way that you treat people, if you're consistent with the way that you do your job, bro, you're going to get recognized for the hard work. And in all honesty, bro, even just doing a lot of these interactions, when I think about the times when I drove for Lyft and Uber, bro, it was very easy for me to honestly kind of land a job. Like, you know, I actually was able to find, a friend of mine a job. I was able to help people find a car, try to help people find a job, mention all these different recommendations, even like to the point of where you were able to help somebody just find their sense of direction for that day. Because you being a positive person for somebody in that moment, you don't know what people are going through. So you just kind of helping yourself, maintaining your positive attitude, even when somebody has kind of like a sour attitude that gets in the car, it's very easy for you to fall in and intake a lot of those emotions. And that's also another thing that is extremely important when it comes to being a Lyft and Uber driver, bro. You have to know when to take time for yourself. When you have goals and stuff that you're trying to get taken care of, we all know that a lot of that stuff can just go off the wayside. Whether it's your emotions, whether it's things that you're going through personally, or when you know you have something that you need to get taken care of, it's very easy to get drowned in that stuff. But when you get drowned in that stuff, you also got to know when to take a break, man. Because doing this day in and day out, man, can get very draining. Think about it like this, bro. So let's say this for example. Let's just say you're working for a construction company and you guys have a deadline of 6 weeks that you have to complete a 3-story building that's supposed to have over 45 different office spaces. So let's just say you run into the example of, oh, it's springtime. There's going to be a lot of rain. There's going to be a lot of inclement weather. At some point, you're going to have to get back to work. Whether the rain happens 3 or 4 days out of the 7-day week, you're going to have to put the work back in. And it's going to be very discouraging when you get taken away from those spaces. But also at the same time, it kind of helps you regroup yourself, bro. So that's where I say, like, you also kind of like have to reshape the way that you think. And you have to reshape the way that you view a lot of these things, bro, because your mindset and the way that you speak to yourself, whether it's, you driving in the car, whether it's you even journaling, bro, you have to find a way to create an outlet for yourself. That way you don't burn yourself out of trying to reach your goals. Because that's another thing in order to reach your goals. Let's just think back about people who are training, for the Olympics, which is actually coming up here pretty soon. People for the Olympics, they do a lot of training for sure. And people who are into fitness, they definitely do a lot of training, but there is always such thing as rest days, because not only does your body need the rest, your mind honestly needs the rest as much as you can possibly give it. I actually read the Psychology Passive one time, and it kind of helped enlighten me and change the way that I thought about things. So with your brain, you have to be able to give your brain mental breaks and find a way to create that bliss for your mind. And most people see that as them going to sleep. But in all honesty, man, if your brain is constantly running and you're constantly burning yourself out, that sleep is not even going to feel like relaxation, because you've put so much energy into everything else, to where when you're laying down, you think that you're trying to rest and you think you're resetting, but your brain doesn't know when to turn it off because you've never given yourself that space to just relax, that space to take a breath, man. There's so many things that really come into play when it comes to you being a Lyft and Uber driver, bro. But ultimately, man, ultimately, at the end of the day, man, this is all about positive affirmations and the way that you speak to yourself, bro. So, if it's one thing that I've learned about life in general, is just the way that you speak to yourself and the way that you handle a lot of situations really go a long way. So if you get into a situation to where something can turn into a confrontation and you don't know how things are gonna end, you can't fixate yourself on trying to predict the end when you're still trying to maintain your way through the interaction. Because if you ground yourself and you take the time to actually listen to people throughout this confrontation or disagreement, there's always a common ground that you guys can come to, or there's always a word or something that can be said that can be the turning point to not make things turn ugly, bro. And also, and that's not just saying getting physical or anything of that sort, but just the mental drain that it takes from hearing certain verbiage that is coming to you based off of an interaction or a conflict that you have with somebody. And that right there, just taking that little moment to relax and center yourself and be in the moments, is going to be your biggest determination to let you know whether you are going to be successful and move forward in this life, man. Because taking your time is really one of the greatest assets that you can have in your book. Now, I know a lot of us always think about, like, oh man, my granny, oh man, this old person on the road is taking their time, they're doing this, but it's just because they're not in a rush. They know they have a list that needs to get taken care of, but they're punctual. They're on time because they've taken that time to ground themselves and get in a certain rhythm, to where even if somebody steps in the way of that rhythm they created, they know how to maneuver themselves. They know how to take a step to the left, take a step to the right, or even take a step back, man, because just that little bit of time that you take to ground yourself can really make the biggest difference, man. If there's one thing that I can give people to kind of take away from this, man, you have to take a step back in order to ensure that you don't get stepped on, man. Because your shoes can get stepped on based off of you being too close to a person. And when somebody's stepping on your toes, you feel like you got to bark back, man. So if you take that time to create that space for yourself and make sure that you're giving yourself the amount of room to process and even just breathe, bro, it can really go a long way. So that's the same aspect that you can really put to you being a Lyft and Uber driver, my guy. So don't let a lot of these goals, these gurus, these people on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram get into your head to create false realities to take you away from the goal that you have created for your route. Because your route works for you and you only, and nobody else can judge you off the things that you are doing. Outside of a couple of things, of course, man. Let's not be naive or anything like that. But listen to me, my guy. If there's one thing that I really want you to always be aware of, is be aware how you are speaking to yourself, be aware how you are speaking to people, and also make sure that you are being aware on how you handle and react to situations, man. Because even if you think that you speaking a certain way isn't going to affect you in any type of way in that moment, you don't know what's going to come after that. And you don't also know what energy is attached to people, bro. So that's just something that I really want to make sure that everybody always remembers at the end of the day is that you kind of have to choose yourself, bro. You have to choose yourself at the end of the day, especially if you are an independent contractor and you are your own boss. Sometimes you don't really get those breaks. But if you take that time to create a break, to create a space, such as stepping back, or even just taking a moment to, do some yoga, find something that gives you that just like mental, like, even something as simple as that, man. Everything matters when it comes to handling yourself, man. Because if you can't handle yourself correctly, how are you going to be able to handle other people whenever they get into your car if you're already feeling a certain way, bro? Just think about that, bro. That's something that I always want people to always remember, man, is that you cannot be good to people on a half dead battery, man. You have to make sure that you're always taking the time to recharge yourself. And recharging yourself isn't just going to sleep. Let's just be honest with you, bro. But, anyways, I think I've said enough and kind of just rambled on for the majority of this episode, man. But of course, as always, man, if you're not following me, that at itymd.podcast is going to be on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music Podcasts, and everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at. The email, itymd.podcast, which is itymd.podcast@gmail.com, man. And that's, of course, if you have any stories or anything that you want to get off your chest, I'll go ahead and read it for you like a Reddit confession, man. So, of course, as always, Ricky Montoya, a.k.a. the Foolest of All Bears, signing off. I appreciate everybody that's always listening, man. Peace.
Going too fast, 150 on a dash, bitch keep up, please don't crash, that's 5-0 on your ass, don't get stuck, my shit blasting up, window tinted, can't get caught, my bitch bad, sport mode leave you on your ass.